And hello everybody, welcome to Wrong Side Simulations. My name is Blake and I am a real world flight dispatcher aiming to bring you a little more context to your flight sim experience. And today, very excited, we're going to talk about the brand new Simbrief update, which is 2023.54. It just dropped earlier today, August 7th. The first big update actually came 2 days ago on August 5th. But since then, there have been some more updates to update basically the formats for the OFPs with the new fueling capabilities. So yeah, we're going to talk about the FAA domestic reserve policy, FAA flag policy, and then we're also going to talk about some of the capabilities that we now have with saved airframes. So I'm going to try to make this quick. I don't want to be too long-winded because I can get very long-winded with this stuff. So let's jump right into it and move right along. We're going to click New Flight. Alright, so this is how you would typically find your flight if you come in and you plan it from scratch like I do. With that said, there will be two boxes that are collapsed, and you'll at least at a minimum want to expand your fuel planning box. This is all the new capability we got right here. So before we do that, let's type in our stuff. We're going to be YipJet Airways Flight 88 from Atlanta to Miami. And we're going to plan a precautionary alternate of Fort Myers because I already know this is like my 7th take of this fucking video. There's vicinity thunderstorms. And we're going to get the A320. And we're going to pick the Phoenix YipJet. Alright, cool. Before we get into this, I'm going to change my format to Lido because I'd imagine that's probably what most of y'all use. I think most people probably don't even know you can change your OFP format. But so we got Lido already in there for us, and for this flight, we got an engine-driven generator deferral, which requires flight level 330 or lower, and we'll say we got 120 pounds. 100 pounds, fine. Cool. Okay, so. See how big I can make this. Now this is the main part of what we want to look at for today's episode with the update, right? So first things first, contingency fuel. It's pretty simple. In fact, Simbrief's it kind of has too much stuff. It has some things that are irrelevant in my opinion. I've been a flight dispatcher now for 7 or 8 years. I've been trained on 4 different dispatch flight planning software, however you want to call it, and none of them have ATC and weather. Okay, they all comprise ATC and weather fuel into contingency fuel. Contingency fuel is fuel Contingency fuel is basically extra fuel planned for any constraint, whether it's weather, traffic, turbulence, anything that can delay the landing of an aircraft, that goes into contingency fuel. It is for your contingency plan. It's like, we ran into this issue, what do we do now? And typically that is going to resort to a higher fuel burn, so you plan extra gas for that. Okay, so again, any constraint, whether it's ATC, whether it's weather, turbulence, whatever the case, goes in contingency fuel. And the reason why it does is because contingency fuel is protected. Super important. Contingency fuel contributes to your min required takeoff fuel, which means when you enter the runway, you must have that quantity or greater on the airplane, because it's that fuel is on there for a reason, en route. That's why this ATC fuel and weather fuel is irrelevant, because really it goes up here, that way it's protected. Alright, reserve fuel. If you're flying inside the continental United States, if you're not going outside of the borders, to keep it simple, there are exemptions to this in the real world, but for simming purposes, if you're flying within the United States, you want to be on FAA domestic. Okay, it's a domestic flight. Simple enough. That's going to give you 45 minutes of reserve fuel. To keep it simple, to not get in the nitty gritty, 45 minutes of reserve fuel. Taxi fuel, we know what that is. Just fuel to taxi on. All right, block fuel. Block fuel, we're basically telling the software, hey, I want to depart with this amount of fuel. I want this much gas loaded on my airplane before I push, right? So I don't really know as much of when you would use this in real life, unless like you fly for a VA that says like, hey, you have to have at least this amount of fuel. This would be the perfect time to use it. In the real world, Airbus used to require a minimum of 10,000 pounds of fuel on the airplane. For like example, Orlando to Lauderdale, very short flight. It would often, all the fuel, once you had all the fuel on, it'd be less than 10,000 pounds. Airbus required it to have weight in the tip tanks to negate wing shuttering. So as a dispatcher, I'd be putting 10,000 pounds of fuel, and I'd also give them a little bit extra. Now, even more important is the arrival fuel. Arrival fuel, we're telling Simbrief, hey, I want to land with at least 5,500 pounds or more, okay? So if you put, a quantity here, Simbrief's not going to put that quantity in the event, like if you have, extra gas and alternates and stuff, right? You're going to have more than, at least in this case, we're going to have more than 5,500 pounds. We're just telling it, hey, Simbrief, I want to land with at least this much or more. Or more, it's very important. Now, if we're min-fuel in the flight, if there's nothing going on, no weather, no turbulence, no ATC, no nothing, right? Then we wouldn't have the precautionary alternate, whether it's up here, and we probably wouldn't have this contingency fuel. So we just tell it 5,500 pounds, and it's going to land with 5,500 pounds. At least planned to land with 5,500 pounds. All right, now MEL fuel. MEL is going to be kind of hard for simmers to simulate because you need the minimum equipment list, which is basically it's a book that you get from the aircraft manufacturer, and that book tells you what you can fly with that's broken, like I don't know, like engine-driven generator. Okay. We have 2 engine-driven generators. One can be deferred as long as like the APU and a whole bunch of other stuff works, right? Well, the MEL book is going to tell you that. It's going to tell you, like, as a real-life pilot, you'd be, like, hey, so this button doesn't work. Can we go without it? So they'll call maintenance control. They'll tell them about it. Maintenance control will open up the MELs and be like, all right, so that is the ILS push button, and we can go, but, or it basically just tells you what you can fly with, what you can't fly with. That's not working. So in the event, like some MELs and some CDLs, configuration deviation list, that's going to be anything that's messed up on the outside of the airplane. Some things have a higher fuel burn as a result of it being broken. So engine-driven generator, we have to run the APU for the entire flight. Looking at the MEL right next to me, it states that it has to fly at or below flight level 330, so we got that in there. But then there's also an associated fuel burn because the APU is going to be running for the entire flight, right? So at 30,000 feet, it's 119 pounds per hour. You would look at the longevity of the flight, so you're considering all fuel in time, right? So if it's an hour, and a half fuel burn from Atlanta to Miami, plus we have our 45 minutes reserve, so now we're at like 2 hours and 15 minutes, but we got another 15 minutes of hold fuel or contingency fuel, so now that's what, 2.5 hours. Yeah, I guess you wouldn't really, you'd consider taxi fuel because you'd be burning the APU while you're taxiing, so then, I don't know, so that's another 10 minutes. So right, so you're kind of adding up all the time, and then you would calculate your fuel based off of that. So let's say 3.5 hours, just to be restrictive. So we want to go. It's 119 pounds per hour. So 119 times, we'll round it up from 3.5 hours to 4. It's 476 pounds. So we just round it up to 500. And now I've got 500 pounds of fuel for the APU burn due to the MEL. Now, there is some conflicting ness with Simbrief on this topic, but we'll get there in a second. Okay, again, so ATC fuel and weather fuel. In real life, that is all encompassed into contingency fuel. We would never, ever use this in real life, ever. We just put the fuel up here, and then we come down. We say what the gas is for. Dispatch add fuel for weather deviations between this waypoint and this waypoint. Now, extra. This is where things get a little weird. Also, the MEL fuel is weird too, but we'll get there in a second. I wonder what this will tell you. Fuel requires to satisfy the minimum equipment list. See, there we go. Performance penalty. All right. Now, for this little drop down, gives you multiple different options to relabel what the fuel is for, whether it's extra, additional, APU, hold. I have no idea what NAVIGRaph is, and then optional. So really, it's just relabeling it for the OFP. But what drives me nuts about this is that some of these would require the fuel to be considered in the minimum required takeoff fuel, and then others wouldn't, so that they're not all the same. Extra, additional, and optional fuel would go below the line, so it's not considered, it's not, it doesn't contribute to the min required takeoff fuel, whereas APU and hold fuel does. So that's kind of an inaccuracy there. It's not the biggest deal in the world. But as a real-life dispatcher, that would drive me nuts. So for this demonstration, we're just going to leave it under extra. And at my airline, all aircraft or all flights have an extra 15 minutes. So essentially, this 5,500 pounds equates to roughly an hour of extra gas. So that's going to be your 45 minutes of reserve, and then your 15 minutes of extra. And then tankering. Tankering is hard to simulate as well because you need gas prices to simulate tankering. So if gas is way cheaper in Atlanta than it is Miami, well, we're going to take a lot of extra gas so that we're not having to buy as much in Miami. You can't really simulate that unless somehow you got fuel prices. Another reason too why you would tanker in real life, if Miami is having logistical issues getting fuel to their fuel farm, whether it's like the port was damaged from a hurricane or whatever the case, right? We would tanker fuel in to reduce our uplift. It'll take me a swig of a drink. Now it's getting dry. Okay. So that's tanker fuel. Can't really simulate it, but it's there if you ever want to tanker. Yeah, so that is, that's it. Let's do this real quick. In regard to the 500-pound MEL fuel. MEL fuel, much like this extra, it does not go into the minimum required takeoff fuel like it should in real life. So where it puts this fuel is wrong. We'll generate real quick and show you what I'm talking about. Okay. So, MEL fuel. Well, first of all, let's start with min required takeoff fuel. Min required takeoff fuel is like a line in the sand. Any fuel that is required for flight. So your trip fuel, so flying from A to B, your contingency fuel, your alternate fuel, and your reserve fuel, all that belongs above the line. Well, other fuels like MEL fuel for performance penalties also have to go into the min required takeoff fuel. It is protected fuel. You need that airplane, or you need that fuel on the airplane when you enter the runway, so that you have it for flight. Simbrief puts the MEL fuel not in the min required takeoff fuel. So that's wrong, and it's kind of a bit, in real life that'd be a big deal. Essentially, what we could do is just add this 500 pounds to your contingency fuel, and then it will also increase this by 500 pounds, and you're good to go. That's what I would do in Simbrief to make it calculate correctly, but I want y'all to be in the know about it. So MEL fuel is not going to go in the correct spot. If we come back here and we edit this extra, right? Let's make it additional. Let's go pounds and let's make it 500. All right, view PDF. Now let's see what it did. It didn't do anything. It just relabeled it from extra. So see, it was extra, and now it's APU, and it put the quantity, but that is performance penalty type fuel, so it would have to go into there. Therefore, we would need to add it to contingency fuel and not either of these. Cool. Now let's switch over to flag fuel. So flag fuel, obviously, if you're flying outside of the continental United States, it's going to change the reserve fuel logic a little bit. So let's make this Lauderdale to Guayaquil. We'll give an alternative SEMT. Okay. Now we'd want to change our reserve fuel to flag. And essentially what this is going to do is flag reserve fuel is 30 minutes of reserve fuel plus 10%. Okay. So when we hit PDF and we zoom in and look at it, we've got our, oh, it combines it both into one. That simplifies things. Okay, now to prove that I'm not wrong, let's change the format to United 2018. And none, make this faster. No, dang. Be editing this out. View PDF. Okay. Now onto the fuel. So here we go. Federal Aviation Regulation, so reserve fuel, right? 30 minutes plus 10%. So when you combine both of these, that equates to your flag reserve fuel. At my airline, when we run a hold, so let's say if we had, we were flying from Lauderdale down to Guayaquil, and there's a thunderstorm over Guayaquil, so we're going to hold. It will only, when we calculate their hold numbers, it's going to run the 10% from their present position to the destination, which is very short compared to leaving from the origin, right? So this would be a lot shorter. We'd have to go back to the OFP, grab the original amount, and put it in. So that's always important to be able to separate and distinguish the 10% from the 30 minutes. At least that's what I'm used to. Under the Lido format, it's just combining both of these figures into one, kind of simplifying it for you. And that's really the only difference between flag fuel and domestic fuel. Now, last things to talk about. Saved airframes. We now have fuel capabilities within each airframe. So let's find the YipJet 320CO, which is what we were just planning with a second ago. And I'm going to get rid of, just to make sure, I'm going to get rid of my face so y'all can see all of this. So airframe planning, or fuel planning. We can dictate certain quantities per aircraft type, which is very important. Myself and my buddy Shaq and Cali Simmer, we run a little virtual airline on New Sky, where when we create an airplane in our fleet, the airplane is recognized based off of this Simbrief internal ID number. So whenever somebody goes to fly that airplane and they do the automated generate OFP functionality, it's going to use whatever we have set in here. And if I want to protect my pilots from accidentally planning too little of fuel, then this is a great way for me to do that. So contingency fuel, I'll leave that to their discretion. Reserve fuel, pretty much all of our flights are domestic US, at least as of right now. So we're going to set domestic as the reserve fuel. Taxi fuel, we'll make it a general 500. Now all these figures can be changed within the flight itself when planning the flight, but this is going to be the minimum when someone uses this airplane. Okay, arrival fuel, I want a minimum of 5,500 pounds. MEL, HC weather, not going to do anything extra. We're going to make 15 minutes. So that no matter what, they're landing with roughly an hour of extra gas. And this will keep them from accidentally generating an OFP and not making any changes and then landing with too little of fuel. So we can make those changes, hit save airframe, and now when someone goes into YipJet, or even if it's just me, if I go to fly a new flight, right? Let's go do Atlanta to Miami again. We'll select the airplane, we'll select which one, and then watch this. Fuel planning. Everything I just set in the saved airframe is now there. It's pretty awesome, I must say. So hopefully this will answer any of the questions that you have. Hopefully it taught you a little something. Feel free to ask any questions in the comments. Again, I do this for a living, so I'd love to answer any questions that you have. Also, my Discord is going to be in the description below, so you can go there and DM me any questions you have as well. I'd be more than happy to elaborate on anything that you want to know about. If you found this content to be educational and you learned something and you enjoyed it, hopefully consider subscribing. At a minimum, please smash the like button. We are on the road to 1,000 subscribers, which is awesome. Greatly appreciate everybody who stopped by to watch this video. Thank you if you made it this far through it. And I do want to do another video on EROPS, so not ETOPS, but EROPS flight planning, which is kind of an ETOPS mini version. Got a few other things I want to do as far as flight planning goes to teach y'all, because I'm sure there's a lot of people that don't know some of the more in-depth inner workings. But this type of flying we're talking about would be like Boston to San Juan, right? You're going deep water, but you're not necessarily, you're not ETOPS. You're not ETOPS certified. So we'll talk about that in a future video. But thank y'all so much for watching, and as always, be good at it, keep it on the wrong side. We'll see y'all on the next one.